Week 15 of the fantasy football season, and here's a few running backs I look to get off the wire this week. The first guy, Chase Brown of the Cincinnati Bengals. So Chase Brown, last week he broke out for this Cincinnati Bengal team, and this week once again he came out there on 11 touches and had a huge game, 8 carries, 25 yards, 3 catches, 80 yards, and a receiving touchdown on a big screen. So right now Brown available in tons of fantasy leagues at 94%, and he didn't really start getting work until last week where he had a good game as well, averaging 7 yards per carry. So right now, obviously, Joe Mixon the bell cow over there for Cincinnati. But Chase Brown, the last couple weeks, he's had 9 or more touches, and he's starting to get some work. As a change of pace back and a speed guy, could catch the football out of the backfield. So right now, if you need a running back in the deeper leagues, or even your mediocre 12, 14 team leagues, entering the playoffs here this week, I think Chase Brown's a good ad this week. The next running back, Deonta Foreman of the Chicago Bears. So Deonta Foreman, he looked like the better back out there for this Bear team, and he got good work with 13 total touches in this one. 11 carries, 50 yards, 2 catches, 22 yards in the Week 14 victory versus the Detroit Lions. I know Khalil Herbert, he's been back over the last few weeks, but Herbert, he really hasn't done much for the Chicago Bear team, where he only had 3 carries. So right now it still looks like Foreman's the man in the backfield, and a lot of people obviously dropped him with him missing a game with the ankle injury and the bye week. So Foreman available in 62% of fantasy leagues. We know he's a physical back, and he plays well when this team has the lead because he's not really a receiver out of the backfield. But if you need a running back this week, I think Foreman's a decent ad. The next running back's Clyde Edwards-Helaire, the Kansas City Chiefs. Isaiah Pacheco, he was out of this game, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire, it wasn't a great game, but he did get 13 touches in the tough Week 14 loss versus the Bills. 11 carries, 39 yards, and 2 catches, 29 yards. So obviously he's the starting running back with Jerick McKinnon, the passing downs back, and change of pace back for the Kansas City Chiefs team, even though we saw McKinnon have a goal line stamper in that Week 14 loss. This week, a good matchup at the Patriots. We know they really can't stop anyone, even though they had a nice victory on Thursday Night Football in Week 14 at the Pittsburgh Steelers. So Clyde Edwards-Helaire, if Pacheco's going to be out once again, he's available in 50% of fantasy league, and a running back that obviously knows the system and has been there for many seasons now with the Kansas City Chiefs. Next running back's his teammate, Jerick McKinnon of the Kansas City Chiefs. So McKinnon right now available in 59% of fantasy league. Less work than Edwards-Helaire versus that Buffalo Bills in Week 14, but he had more fantasy points, 4 carries, 19 yards, a rushing touchdown on the goal line, 3 catches, 18 yards in that one. So McKinnon, more explosive back. Last season, he had a great year, but he's been phased out of the offense a lot, where maybe they should start lining him up as a receiver because they've had problems all season at the receiving position is this Kansas City Chiefs team. So Jerick McKinnon, we know he's an explosive back, good receiving back out of the backfield, and as long as Pacheco remains out as well, he's going to have some fantasy appeal, is Jerick McKinnon. The next running back's Ty Chandler of the Minnesota Vikings. So Ty Chandler, he's been on the radar for a decent amount this season here. Now Alexander Madison left that game, and Chandler got a decent workload after Madison left. 12 carries, 35 yards, 3 catches, 7 yards. So Ty Chandler, I think, is a better receiving back out of the backfield. We saw it in a couple games early in the season that he's gone out there and put up some decent fantasy numbers with a decent workload. Week 10 versus New Orleans, 15 carries, 45 yards a touch. And Week 11 at Denver, 10 carries, 73 yards, and 4 catches, 37 yards. So like I've been saying in the videos over the last few weeks, Chandler a better receiver out of the backfield than Madison. He's got more burst as well, in my opinion. Madison this season, a lot of injuries, but he's overcome them and he's played throughout. But right now with a ankle sprain, we'll see how long Madison's going to be out. If it's a high ankle sprain, that's probably multiple weeks, unless he toughs it out like Trevor Lawrence did this week. But anyway, Ty Chandler and him, I think, are going into a split. We saw with Cam Akers before he went down with the Achilles. Him and Madison pretty much a 50-50 split. And Chandler right now is getting work, available in 78% of fantasy leagues. And the final running back I looked at off the wire is Zamir White of the Vegas Raiders. So Josh Jacobs, he left the ball game for the Raiders in Week 14 in a just horrendous game by both teams, losing 3-0 to the Minnesota Vikings. So Zamir White, obviously, he really hasn't had opportunity with Josh Jacobs being the main running back for many seasons, and White only in the league 2 years. So he finished that game with 2 carries for 8 yards. But like I said, if Josh Jacobs is going to be out for a couple weeks, or even Jacobs now, we don't even know what's going to happen because he did sign the franchise tag, and maybe he don't want to push it and risk not getting a long-term deal in the offseason. So right now with the knee injury, we got to see what the deal is with Josh Jacobs. But right now, Zamir White is definitely on the radar, and he's available in 98% of fantasy leagues. That's a few running backs I looked at off the wire in Week 15 of the fantasy football season.